Welcome to Publishing in Defense, Security, and Politics, a special series of On Defense and Security. In this series, we speak with editors to understand opportunities for publishing research on defense and security, international relations, and related topics. On Defense and Security is a podcast produced at the Center for International and Defense Policy. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our series of interviews with journal editors. Today, we're delighted to bring the editors of International Journal. International Journal is Canada's pre-eminent journal of global policy analysis. It combines brief, policy-relevant articles with longer, peer-reviewed scholarly assessments of interest to foreign policymakers, analysts, and academics in Canada and around the world. IJ is cross-disciplinary, combining the insights of history, political science, and economics with anthropology and other social sciences to advance research and dialogue on issues of global significance. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Editors-in-Chief Asa McKercher, Stephen K. Hudson Research Chair at St. Francis Xavier University, and Leah Sarson, Associate Professor and Director of the Center for the Study of Security and Development. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
To start off our interview, I was wondering if you could describe the scope of your journal within the field of international politics.
Sure. Well, the journal was founded in 1946 by the Canadian Institute for International Affairs, the CIIA, now the Canadian International Council, CIC. And was founded basically as a sort of a Canadian version of Foreign Affairs or International Affairs in the United Kingdom, as the sort of house journal of the CIIA, which, as I think members will know if they're members of the CIC or members of the kind of wider community will know about the CIC, has branches across the country of academics, former civil servants, members of various civil society organizations interested broadly in sort of international affairs and Canada's place therein. And so since 1946, IJ has been the sort of house journal. But over the years, it's expanded out to be a bit more of an academic journal in the sense that it accepts, obviously, submissions not just from members of the CIA or now CIC, but broadly just from political scientists, economists, historians, other members of the social sciences. And certainly over the past maybe 10 years or so, it kind of, I think, moved a bit further away from its sort of engagement with foreign policy community, sort of broadly speaking, into the far more academic field. And so I think one of the things that Leah and I are doing, and we've seen that over the past issue or volume that we've been working on together, has been to bring in some of those policymakers back into the conversation, given the kind of situation confronting Canada geopolitically. We think it's important to create a venue in which people like Lloyd Axworthy or Bob Ray, just to take some recent interventions, will publish their speeches and policy papers and other kinds of things in IJ. In addition, of course, to the usual gamut of academics and sort of members of civil society organizations. So we think that's sort of where our sort of focus is sort of, back to the future. IJ is just about to, commemorate its 80th anniversary, if you like. And so we're interested in maintaining that academic piece, but also including policy briefs and including sort of policy papers, speeches and public commentary by public officials as well.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think that one of the really unique things about IJ is our capacity to build community among folks who are interested in Canadian foreign policy. Again, whether it's scholars, practitioners, people from civil society. We've been trying over the last couple of years to, as Asa said, to diversify some of our different offerings. We have some different kinds of forums, different kinds of conversations, field reports, showcasing all of the really exciting, engaging opportunities to get involved in Canadian foreign policy from one venue or another. And I think that's something that the pandemic really showed us, is how important it is to foster that community. And I've really been excited to see what Asa and I have been able to do, and looking forward to what we're able to do over the next couple of years.
So, in addition to this particular focus on Canada, and we do appreciate the significance of having a Canadian-based journal. Are there any specific theoretical or methodological areas of focus for the journal, or is it more open to a variety?
It's absolutely open to a variety, and I think that reflects the uh, general ethos of folks engaged in global politics in Canada. This sort of more pluralist approach to engaging in ideas and questions of global politics. One of the things that we're really keen to do is reflect a broad recognition that global politics generally and Canadian foreign policy specifically look beyond the sort of initial things that we might think about when we think about international relations, to recognize, for instance, how critical race and gender, indigeneity, all of those different issues where we might typically think of them as issues of domestic politics, and recognizing how difficult it is to parse those two out. So I would certainly say that we welcome all different kinds of interventions, all different kinds of methodological and theoretical orientations. And again, recognizing that someone who's not coming from an academic background might not be all that engaged in some of these philosophy of social science debates, and welcoming those sort of policy briefs and other approaches as well.
I should just add, I mean, we're in a time of, elbows up nationalism or something, but our content isn't only Canadian. I mean, most of our subscribers and readers are Canadian, but we're part of the Sage Publishing conglomerate, I suppose. And so a lot of our content is obviously more widely available through the click of a university library subscription. I guess our older catalog is JSTOR anyway. And so we also feature, of course, writing by non-Canadians as well on non-Canadian topics. We're not just a closed shop to non-Canadians. So, but as Leah said, we try to run the gamut of, quote unquote, kind of hard power, traditional IR kind of stuff, and a bit more I guess, I don't know, I say this as an historian, more kind of forward thinking or contemporary kind of constructions of security and international relations and those sorts of things. With some history mixed in, thank goodness. Some sensible stuff. No offense to social scientists.
We've heard a couple of references to different publishing formats that are available in your journal. Would you mind sharing a bit about how the review process works and perhaps highlighting those different genres that you publish?
Sure. So we have our sort of standard research article, standard 7,000, 8,000 words, standard kind of, double-blind peer review kind of process. We also have policy briefs. They tend to be shorter pieces, a few thousand words. They really need a point, right? Obviously, a policy recommendation of some sort. They're double-blind peer reviewed as well. One thing Leah and I have done is to introduce a sort of field report. This is something IJ, again, used to do in the 50s and 60s. If you have a conference, if you have an event, the Kuchiching conference, annual kind of event, they used to do a rundown of the papers presented, for the benefit of those who obviously couldn't attend. And so we are sort of reintroducing that kind of feature because, again, there's a lot of great ideas that are put out at conferences and symposia and things like that don't necessarily find their way into publication or do through, many years after the fact. Through edited collections or what have you. So we want a kind of a more up-to-date kind of approach. And again, we've started publishing largely through kind of special collections that have been kind of presented to us by academics and people who do put together special collections, featuring again policymakers, diplomats, either former or serving, other kinds of civil servants who can give us a speech, which isn't necessarily peer reviewed, but could certainly give us, again, last autumn we had several kind of think pieces by not only Kim Richard Nossel, now a former retired professor from Queen's, a very eminent scholar on Canadian foreign policy, but Carrie Buck, former Canadian ambassador to NATO and Foreign Service officer for many years, on her kind of views on the changing international order, as well as Bob Ray, who's obviously Canada's ambassador at the United Nations currently. So different kinds of pieces by different kinds of people. And again, that's reflecting partly, we hope, the kind of situation in which we find ourselves geopolitically as Canadians, I suppose broadly more to people through the world, but also the fact that, again, our readership is not just academics through the CIC. Again, every CIC member gets a membership to IJ, and many of those people are, not necessarily interested in offensive neo-realism theory, version 7 or something. So, no offense to people interested in IR theory, but there's a broader readership that we're also key to appeal to.
Always the historian slagging IR theory. And I also just like to add, it's really exciting to be able to open up IJ to different kinds of publications, especially as we recognize some of the damage that gatekeeping on the part of editors can do. So we really do encourage submissions of all kinds. If anybody has an idea for a kind of piece that they'd be interested in publishing, we certainly would welcome hearing from them. And again, hopefully this creates a little bit more space for folks who don't always see their ideas reflected in IJ and other publications to be able to get themselves and their ideas into publication. So as I just said, we certainly invite any ideas and all ideas from all kinds of different folks.
I think you mentioned this in response to the first question, but are there any specific emerging debates or themes, perhaps historically underrepresented in the pages of academic journals that you're specifically interested in receiving submissions about?
We've obviously featured sort of recent. Well, actually, maybe it's forthcoming. Can I blow the lid off? Anyway, so it's critical look at sort of gender and feminism in foreign policy. I think there's a special issue that's forthcoming, Leah. Can I say that? I guess I have. We've divulged it, although it might be in print by the time this podcast airs. Anyway, so that's an area that I think is a bit underrepresented, and certainly we have a special issue forthcoming on that that's coming out. I suppose, just from more kind of normative perspective, I think we've got a lot of papers in the hopper and proposals for special issues and other kinds of things. Again, dealing with the kind of the fate of Canada and the world as we find ourselves in the second Trump term, and the wider kind of changes in the international setting. I think that's sort of an area of interest for people, but I don't know if that's underrepresented. But that's certainly, we're seeing a lot of focus on that in our papers that are in peer review right now. And certainly proposals from different colleagues regarding special issues, sort of the fate of middle powers, the fate of the international order, and the fate of Canada within the kind of these huge kind of currents.
Yeah, and I think we would be remiss not to mention the increased interest that we've seen related to issues of course, Israel and Gaza and Canadian policy on the Middle East. So we have a couple of interventions that have just been published and a couple forthcoming that I think really speak to some of the debates that are happening on the ground.
And I should say they're reflecting multiple perspectives.
Absolutely, yeah.
Not always necessary ones that we as editors agree with, but things have passed through a rigorous peer review process, and they're debates to have. So,
as our authors prepare their submissions to send to IJ, especially in these areas of interest, are there any recent articles or policy briefs that potential authors could review to see what a successful IJ piece looks like?
Well, one thing that Asa and I have, I suppose, resurrected are are awards for, let's see if I get this right, top article in Canadian foreign policy and top article by an early career scholar. So this year we were so excited to be able to feature some work by two really, really engaging ECRs, one who is at the University of Maine, writing on Canada-US relations, of course, such a, well, it sounds trite, but hot topic right now. So taking a look at some of those award-winning pieces is a great approach. But also, if you scan the pages of IJ virtually, you'll see that we really do publish quite a diversity of pieces with a diversity of approaches and perspectives. So I won't necessarily say that there is some sort of template or standard other than the kind of typical advice that you might receive from an editor-in-chief regarding parsimony, being parsimonious, being direct about articulating your argument, ensuring that you're actually delivering on the argument, all of those different pieces of advice that you would normally expect to hear from an editor.
But again, if you even just look at the last few issues in our policy brief section, you'll see we've got things on critical minerals, we've got pieces on Arctic sovereignty, we've got pieces on on AI and the sort of cybersecurity risks for Canada. We have Indo-Pacific strategy. We have a variety of topics that I think reflects the kind of wide focus of academics and policymakers that are willing to publish or interested in publishing in our pages. So.
I want to thank both of you very much for joining the podcast and providing this window into the International Journal editorial vision. And congratulations on the upcoming anniversary of the journal. I hope that I have a wonderful celebration of the contributions that authors and editors have made over the years.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure to be here. And again, just to reiterate that we really do welcome any ideas or thoughts for pieces that folks might want to contribute, either scholarly or of a unique nature.
Thank you very much.